Today, Garuda Indonesia is seen as one of the world's best airlines. With a 5-star rating, it shuttles over 50,000 passengers from all over the world every day.
Flying with Garuda is must for me.
But just 2 decades ago, Indonesia's flag carrier was in serious trouble, and it was inching towards bankruptcy.
There was no cash. There's so many receivables, but cash is not enough.
And then, a series of disasters pushed the company even closer to the edge.
2001, September 11th, 2002 Bali bombing, 2003 SARS. It generally didn't bode very well for Garuda.
They recognized at that point that they were in default. The luck in here is that we had parties at the top who were saying, we have to change the way we've done things.
This is the story of how Indonesia's national airline survived turbulent times and was dragged back from the brink.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Garuda Indonesia Airlines.
Garuda Airlines is today Indonesia's pride and joy. The nation's flag carrier, connecting its 250 million people to the rest of the world.
People always describe Garuda as the small Indonesia because it's an airline which describes the potential of Indonesia.
But on 26 September 1997, a paralyzing panic took hold in Garuda's headquarters. Garuda Flight GA152, an Airbus A300, carrying 234 passengers and crew, was cleared to land at Polonia International Airport in Medan. Just minutes away from landing, a wrong instruction from air traffic controllers caused the plane to crash.
Jangan dibelok sini.
Saya pulang terbang. Saya mendengar kabar dari teman-teman kalau ada pesawat jatuh Garuda. Saya tanya gimana keadaan penumpang dan awak pesawatnya, awak kabinnya. Meninggal semua katanya. Jadi saya kaget.
Dwi's career as a stewardess with Garuda had taken off just 3 years before the crash in Medan.
Ada yang lagi sedang hamil, ada yang baru merit, kasihan. Saya nggak bisa ngomong.
Like Dwi, the rest of Indonesia and the world were desperate for any news and updates. Garuda frequent flyer Robert Chow's aunt and uncle were on the plane.
There is no one word can describe about that situation. It's very sad. I was in Jakarta at the time. People are crying, people are cursing. I didn't see much as Garuda take a lot of action for this. I still remember. It's very difficult to find these all Garuda people. They just give you information maybe by phone, but once after a phone call come from Garuda, you keep yelling at them. It's totally messed up that time, really.
Garuda didn't just struggle to cope with the crash and keep bereaved families informed. They also struggled to cope with what became a public relations disaster.
The accident was not handled very well. Very little information was given out. And that the compensation at some point was not deemed to be up to international standards because it was a domestic flight. So there were a lot of issues at that point in time that could have been done better.
Between 1982 and 1997, Garuda had suffered 6 major crashes. At a time when it was expanding internationally, The crashes struck a series of hammer blows to its safety records, customer confidence and balance sheet. Garuda's finances were in disarray. In the first 6 months of 1997, Garuda's losses totaled over a dizzying $45 million. The flag carrier appeared to be spiraling out of control.
After the accident in Medan, demand dropped. Prices that Garuda can offer would be lower. So it's very bad news for an airline with, at that point in time, a lot of aircraft to service.
With poor crisis management and its finances in a mess, Indonesia's national airline had flown badly off course. Founded in 1949, Garuda Indonesia was born out of a desire to unify a newly independent nation. Formerly known as Garuda Indonesian Airways, Garuda positioned itself as an emblem of Indonesian culture and identity and tried to attract the brightest and the best.
Saya tamat dari Flying Academy di Curug. Itu tahun 70. Dan pada saat itu ada seleksi dari Garuda untuk memilih pilot-pilot yang dia sukai. Dari kita 33 orang yang lulus, yang satu angkatan, itu Garuda ambil 10. Jadi itu semacam blessing buat saya. Karena saya diterima di maskapai yang terbaik di Indonesia. Itu Garuda.
In the 70s, the Indonesian government embarked on an ambitious economic plan under President Suharto. With 2 oil booms and billions of dollars pouring in from foreign investors, the Indonesian economy was growing, and Garuda was soon soaring high above its competitors. In those days, Garuda's success was largely because it was owned and controlled by the state. Chappie Hakim was the former chief of the Indonesian Air Force and is very familiar with the country's aviation industry.
Because Garuda is state-owned company, the route permit is very easy. Not the same if the private sector doing. They got the subsidies from the government. They have the certain procedures that not the same as the other airlines.
As a state-owned company, Garuda was insulated from external commercial pressures. And over the next 2 decades, as Indonesia's economy grew in the early 90s, so did Garuda's fortunes.
In the 90s, Garuda was actually a strong network. You know, it stretches all the way to Los Angeles in the US on the one end, Australia down, of course, and then on the other to Europe. It flew to several destinations as well. So it definitely had its geographic reach.
But the lack of any real domestic competition in the aviation industry was sowing the seeds of Garuda's impending crisis.
Garuda has always been holding the monopoly position. The company, I would say, more managed, not marketing oriented. You know, it's more operational, making sure that, you know, flying everywhere. Profitability was not really the objective.
The lack of competition bred complacency. Garuda's service to its customers was seriously compromised. Alvin Lee has been flying with Garuda since the 1960s.
Service reflects the overall attitude of the people engaged in the airline. So back then, it was customers who need Garuda, not the other way around. The atmosphere is that, well, if you don't want to fly, we have other people who are willing to fly, you know.
The plane will be delayed, you pay expensive, the food are lousy. I can't describe it. I mean, you can't eat with that food. You make a complaint, then the cabin crew will give you the complaint form. Please, sir, can you help to fill up? And we will, you know, try to distribute to the management.
In 1996, Garuda's senior management tried to compensate for its poor service with newer planes. The airline ordered 23 new Boeing aircraft, which nearly doubled its fleet of long-range jetliners. But despite adding new routes and more flights, its profits were not impressive, even though passenger numbers had gone up. Something was amiss. And according to some of its staff, it was because Garuda was mired in a culture of corruption.
Ya, memang pada zaman itu di mana-mana kita bisa lihat banyak korupsi. KKN itu juga ternyata menular ke Garuda. Misalnya kargo itu kita angkut barang banyak, tapi nggak ada hasil. Bahkan diberikan kepada salah satu keluarga yang dari penguasa, sumber daya manusianya dari Garuda, semua, tapi Garuda hanya dikasih 200 miliar. Yang selebihnya itu buat dia.
During those days, maybe a lot of hanky-panky. At that time, I think even though Garuda has a very big fleet, and rupiah was very strong, the gasoline is very cheap, so Garuda still kind of afloat. Of course, they make money, but seems to me not that in 90s.
Things were becoming intolerable for the rank and file. After a series of financial fallouts because of corruption, Captain Nababan and his colleagues decided enough was enough. Garuda's staff wanted to take matters into their own hands.
Kita sebagai pilot tidak bisa diam. Makanya waktu itu saya menjadi ketua asosiasi pilot di Garuda. Kita melakukan demonstrasi yang terbesar. Itu sampai 3.000 orang lebih. Kita berkumpul di kantor pusat. Kita bilang stop. Korupsi, kolusi, nepotism, stop. Kita sebagai karyawan, kita sedih. Kita nggak bisa melihat Garuda ini jatuh. Kita biar on the same boat, jadi kita nggak mau tenggelam.
Garuda was having an increasingly bumpy ride, and deeper trouble was looming over the horizon. In July 1997, a financial crisis ripped through Southeast Asia, and the Indonesian rupiah was crippled.
The local currency dropped a lot, and for Garuda, that is very bad news because in terms of its aircraft and fuel, which is the bulk of its cost, these things are denominated in US dollars. These translated into losses. And so dramatically, very immediately, the scale of operation was reduced for Garuda.
A decision was made to call in a new finance director. Emir Shah Sata was a banker in Hong Kong with an international reputation for financial acumen. He was the perfect candidate for the job.
There was no cash when I found out. There's so many receivables, but cash is not enough.
By December 1997, Garuda only had $20 million in cash. The problem was the company's monthly operating expenses came to $60 million.
Definitely, we're stuck. There's no more liquidity to the company.
Garuda was crippled by an accumulated debt of $1.8 billion. In 1997, the financial crisis that first erupted in Thailand sent shockwaves across the Southeast Asian region, and Indonesia was not spared.
It cost us about $70 billion to bail the cost of ASEAN crisis, economic crisis in 1997. So in that context, you can see how difficult Indonesian economy at that time. That story also, happened with Garuda.
The Indonesian rupiah had weakened so much, many local companies that were spending in US dollars were collapsing. But at Garuda, a state-owned enterprise, an even larger problem was brewing. In an attempt to reduce its monstrous debt, Garuda's management kept applying for new loans.
It was very easy for any state-owned company to just write a promissory note and sell it to the market. The worst thing is, they were issuing those papers to cover their negative cash flow. It amounted to more than $350 million.
Emir Shah Sata had just come on board as Garuda's new finance chief, and was already faced with what seemed like an impossible task.
That time, the condition of Garuda was really bad. Even paying salaries is a tough thing. The net worth of Garuda was negative. Legally speaking, it's bankrupt.
Garuda was fighting for its survival, and to make matters worse, its staff had gone public over what they saw as the company's mismanagement.
I remember when we first started, most of the employees, they wear this black armband, basically, because the company is not doing well, everything, and they're blaming the management. And the first thing that we said, if you want to see future of Garuda, take off that armband.
Ketika ada presentasi dari top management di operation, kita tanya, ini gimana nasib kita, nasib Garuda? Dia bilang bahwa kalau kita tidak berbuat sesuatu, maka ini akan kolaps 2 bulan lagi. Wah, terjadilah semua pegawai itu resah.
While Garuda's employees fretted about their jobs, the management began to pursue a radical debt restructuring plan. Thousands of jobs were cut, the fleet was reduced, and new systems were put in place. But there was a fundamental problem to be sorted out. The national airline had been buying the wrong kinds of planes and flying them to the wrong kinds of places.
We had to cut the international routes. It's just not the right route structure. For example, we had to stop LA. There's not enough passengers, and then it's not the right type of aircraft.
Jadi kami pernah menggunakan misalnya MD-11, MD-11. Itu pesawat dari segi menyewanya aja itu udah bermasalah. Sehingga kalau kita hitung semua penumpang penuh itu juga break even belum dapat. Sehingga harus ada penumpang yang harus di atas wing. Seolah-olah gitu. Baru bisa. Jadi ini kan sudah salah di dalam mengelola keuangannya.
But Garuda's pilots and other employees decided to give the new boss a chance to turn things around.
Kita tuh cinta sama perusahaan ini. Ya. Semua yang apalagi tidak mau pindah ke airline lain, itu memang kita loyalty kita tuh udah. Jadi ibarat di sini itu ada logo Garuda. Kita tidak mau, ini hanya karena mismanagement. Nah, kita harus bangkit.
With a former banker as its financial chief, Garuda's operations were quite ruthlessly streamlined to help keep the company afloat.
Immediately, within a few short years, they really shrunk the network. So they've stopped services to the US and then Europe. Everything was cut. So they really focused and shrunk down to the core to serve Asia, East Asia. That was their strategy, to keep it to a minimum to survive.
This strategy was helped by something that was working in Garuda's favor, its brand, which was strong within Indonesia, one of the world's most populous countries.
But Garuda has very strong asset, which is the brand name of Garuda was very strong. Garuda has a lot of problem, debt and all those things. At least, image for local, for domestic market was very strong for Garuda.
It was Garuda's strict downsizing, coupled with its strong brand, that earned the company its first profit in a decade, $62 million. By 2002, the airline was flying about 6 million passengers a year. It began reopening some of the 17 international routes that it had closed in the wake of the Asian financial crisis. But hopes of a full recovery were about to be cruelly dashed. On 12th October 2002, a bomb went off in the tourist district of Kuta in Bali, leaving more than 200 people dead. The tragedy caused a huge dip in Garuda's passenger numbers.
Bali is a very important destination in Indonesia, attracting a lot of tourists, and a lot of flights would fly direct to Bali. So with that incident, visitor numbers dropped and demand for those flights also dropped, so further impacting adversely Garuda's position.
And the impact on the quality of the airline's service to its remaining customers was also immediately obvious.
I remember very clearly, they have announcement, it's already been delayed for almost 2 hours. There's nothing actually show up to you about the service or nothing. It's a difficult time for myself as a passenger, since you already pay high of a ticket.
Terrorist attacks and other plane crashes may have been unavoidable disasters, but something more sinister was coming over the horizon. Prominent human rights activist Munir Saeed Taleb is poisoned on a Garuda flight. And to make things much, much worse, the prime suspect turns out to be a pilot for Garuda, triggering a citywide protest demanding the airline to take responsibility. By 2005, Emir Shah Sattar had taken a new job as CEO of Bank Danamon when he received a phone call. It was a plea from Pak Sugiharto, the Minister of State-Owned Enterprises, to return to Garuda, but this time as the company's chief executive officer.
3 things that I asked from the minister. I get to choose the team. Number 2, I would like the government not to be involved in terms of where Garuda should fly or where Garuda should not fly. Number 3, we need additional capital, about 400 to 450, to strengthen the balance sheet. So that's it. So I finally accepted it.
On top of the company's staggering losses, Emir Shah found an appalling PR crisis on his hands. A passenger had been murdered on a Garuda flight, and a Garuda pilot had been identified as its prime suspect.
On the first day, after being appointed, right, as a CEO, I met the wife of Munir and all those activists because they feel that Garuda is responsible. So I met them and I listened to a request and I say, okay, as of today, I'm going to open a Munir desk in Garuda because I said I will cooperate for whatever it is.
Managing the Munir scandal was just part of the challenge. The new CEO realized that if he didn't take drastic steps, the whole airline could be grounded for good.
In my first few weeks in Garuda, my first task is just like this. For the company, make sure that there is enough cash flow to support the needs. The salary, the operation, we identify these things. And that is in 1 week, we sat down in terms of making sure about what are the priorities.
Garuda's new CEO was making effective changes from the start. And his employees could see that.
Ditunjukkan, diperlihatkan, dibuktikan dengan Pak Emir kalau saya bisa jadi pimpinan dari Garuda. Pada saat itu kami banyak benar permintaan yang paling utama ya kenaikan salary itu aja. Iya, saya nggak meminta lebih. Ya saya minta itu manajemennya diperbaiki. Itu aja.
But fixing the management issues was only step 1. Dealing with the airline's debt was a competing priority. By December 2005, Garuda's debt had mushroomed to more than $800 million, 2/3 of which was owed to European export credit agencies. Emir Shah knew he had to make some bold decisions to reduce the airline's colossal debt, while simultaneously keeping Garuda's operations going. It was a catch-22. Robert Schmitz was a financial consultant who had been hired to look into Garuda's debt.
I think they recognized at that point that they were in default. Again, you have a national mandate to keep these planes in the air, but you're constrained by the resources that you have.
And so Emir Shah decided to default on some of his biggest debt payments. This was a huge gamble, as it was the second time Garuda had restructured its debts in 5 years. The airline's biggest creditors were close to losing faith in the company.
You have parties who at that point, what we call the unsecured creditors, they have to start recognizing they may have to wait. And then we start working with the other parties where we don't feel as we're vulnerable. They're clearly vulnerable to foreclosure actions.
Garuda had to persuade its debtors to keep the faith and to stay patient.
First, I know all the employees of Garuda are skilled, very good. They just need to get direction, okay, where to go. And second, which is important, the Indonesian economy is growing. So I think we have a problem, but it's not a problem that we cannot solve.
Sofyan Jalil was the newly appointed Minister for State-Owned Enterprises.
Garuda at that time was threatened by the debtor, that if they don't structure their debt, the airplane of Garuda will be confiscated. I think the first day or second day I was a new minister, CEO of Garuda, Mr. Amir came to see me, and he told me how dangerous or bad the situation of Garuda.
Sofyan Jalil, which is very, very active in terms of helping Garuda. When he was minister, I immediately reported to him. Debt of Garuda, which is close to $1 billion, is also important. What the creditors can do is take you to court and bankrupt you.
They only had 4 out of 6 A330s that could fly, and then they had to bring in engines. And actually, in order to make the 4 work, fly the engines from Bali, Denpasar, to Jakarta, put them in the plane, and make it go. That's how bad it looked like in 2007. That was a pretty critical moment that you don't even have enough planes, and you didn't have enough money to fix the engines.
Garuda's senior management knew they had to act fast. The first thing they did was to endorse one of Emir Shah's conditions on becoming the CEO, to get additional capital from the government.
Well, of course, when we want to restructure the debt, first is we have to go to the shareholder, definitely. At that time, the Minister of Finance is Ibu Sri Mulyani.
The first one on the checklist was, let's get government support. Sri Mulyani said, no more. That wasn't going to happen. That era was over.
Emir Shah did not receive the $400 million he wanted for Garuda. All he got was $100 million. Then, just as Garuda was pushing forward with their new financial plan, another tragedy struck. On 7th March 2007, Garuda flight GA200 overran the runway, crashed into a rice field and burst into flames while landing at Adi Sucipto International Airport in Yogyakarta. Garuda CEO Emir Shah Sutta was on his way to the office that morning when he heard the news.
Suddenly I got a call. Garuda crashed in Jogja. Immediately I went to the airport and flew there. I mean, I would say that was a very, very traumatic experience, because the difference, if something goes wrong, is the lives. I felt responsible because of this. At the end of the day, it's the CEOs who has to, manage this. So we set up immediately the team, so everybody knows who should approach the families, authorities, and then everything.
21 passengers and crew died in the crash. A Transport Safety Committee report revealed that the pilot of the Garuda aircraft had ignored 15 warnings as he descended far too quickly. But Garuda flight GA200 was not the only Indonesian airline involved in an accident that year. On New Year's Day, an Adam Air budget flight disappeared from the radar off the Indonesian island of Sulawesi and killed 102. Indonesia's air safety records have become one of the worst in the world, and it now led to a crippling ban by the European Union on most Indonesian airlines from flying to Europe.
In 2007, the budget airline business was taking off in this part of the world. It suddenly increased in demand for pilots, led to the fact that they're not getting the adequate training. As a result of that, a number of international investigative authorities also looked into this. They thought, well, this is actually a serious matter, and actually eventually led to the EU authority actually banning Garuda from flying to all or any parts of the European Union. It really now put Garuda back in the bad light in the international airline business, and it's a steep climb from there.
Garuda's senior management realized they needed a new finance director to help pull them back from the brink. Eddie Purwanto was chief financial officer at General Motors when he was approached by the ailing airline. Despite the circumstances, Eddie was optimistic.
When I look at the balance sheet of the company, I was somewhat worried. But knowing that Indonesian market is a large market and Garuda is such a strong brand, I believe that there was an opportunity or a chance for Garuda to be turned around.
But just as Garuda was trying to sort itself out, it was challenged by some new kids on the block.
While Garuda is trying to improve its service quality, other airlines are trying to go to the rock bottom of services and in relation to rock bottom fares.
And to make matters worse, at the same time, oil prices were soaring.
The fuel price was running very high. It was like $120 per barrel back then. But we know that the market is growing very fast. Basically, we had to make every route to be a profit center rather than as a cost center.
Garuda's new management knew they had to convince their European creditors that they would eventually repay their massive debts, just not anytime soon. So Emir Shah Sattar and the newly appointed Minister of State-Owned Enterprises flew to Europe to begin a series of discussions with their creditors in a last-ditch attempt to pull the company back from the brink.
When we first did this roadshow to meet the creditors, which is from UK, Germany, and France, we set up a team. Our financial advisor, Robert Smith, and we had our CFO, Eddie, and Pak Sofian Jalil, of course, the Minister of State-Owned Enterprise.
Sofian Jalil being there, needing to work with the European governments. The discussion starts off, we are here, we're trying to restructure our airline. We can't make these payments.
We just need those export credit agencies, quote unquote, to understand our position, to be patient, okay? Because it's been already going on, but we really have to show what we are doing and then convince them there's a light at the end of the tunnel, okay? So they have to wait.
I think they start to believe that government Indonesia want to deal and want to solve this problem. And I think one good thing is, even though we are in very heavily indebted companies, but we bring a very big market behind us.
Garuda's senior management had a bigger plan in mind, a whole new company independent of the Indonesian state.
The creditors are growing tired, and there's very little progress. Looking at the whole reconfiguration, what should we do now? And this seemed like we want to get to a privatization.
Privatization would mean putting the company on the open market and competing with other commercial airlines. If done well, it could mean an end to the culture of complacency and corruption where no one cared about turning a profit because they had no skin in the game.
Privatization will improve the cash position of the company as well as receiving fresh funds from the new shareholders. And also the fact that you are a publicly listed company, there would be more transparency to help the airlines, to continue to grow the business in this expanding Indonesian market and also in the international market.
Garuda's new management decided to take the plunge.
We all reached a conclusion. This is the way forward. To me, it was a seminal meeting. I saw that it was a moment decided, and then everything else started to carry through. And then that was the path we went.
Garuda's finance director believed there was still a long way to go before the company could be privatized.
Obviously, that meeting was very helpful, but there were still long discussions that were still ongoing. Well, we had to negotiate, one by one with the export credit agency. There was one point in time I shook hand already with the person in charge from the other side. We thought that we had it done, but 2 days later we found out that it wasn't done. So we had to again continue the discussion for some time.
Garuda's chief executive Emir Shahsata worked on another part of the company's restructuring plan, upgrading Garuda's image.
If you come in a company which is not doing well, so there must be something wrong. Now, what is good about Garuda? Garuda is an Indonesian company, okay? What is good about Indonesia? Indonesians are so hospitable. Our hospitality is, so that should be our dream, We are airline, hospitality, providing good services with very good people.
Emir Shah was no armchair general. He went out to shopping malls to hand-pick Garuda's new cabin crew and purchased a whole new fleet. Passengers of Garuda soon began enjoying the new Garuda Indonesia experience.
The branding is more strong now because Garuda, they are talking about how emotionally get connected to the customer like me, When they say hello to you, you know my name. Hello, Mr. Chow, welcome back. I don't even recall when I meet her, But the relationship now becomes stronger. So he win the passenger is by connecting. Yes, I see Garuda now.
Emir Shah was no ordinary leader. He believed in leading by example and wasn't afraid of getting his hands dirty.
He got together the team on a Saturday and scrubbed the bathrooms to show that's what you need to do. And I thought that was clever and it's catchy, but it also was saying something about what we want to do with this airline.
Ya, saya kira manajer yang sangat bagus yang bisa menggunakan orang-orang yang potensial menjadi suatu produk yang prima. Dan dia orang yang saya lihat sangat concern terhadap image. Sehingga dia misalnya cabin configuration itu di beberapa pesawat itu di-refurbish oleh dia sehingga menjadi kelihatan lebih mewah.
But in February 2008, a scandal from the past re-emerged to confront Emir Shah and his team. Garuda's former CEO, Indra Setiawan, was sentenced to 12 months in jail for his part in a conspiracy to murder Munir Said Talib, Indonesia's most prominent human rights activist. On 7th September 2004, Indonesia's most prominent human rights activist, Munir Said Talib, was murdered on Garuda Flight 974. The prime suspect, a Garuda pilot. And in February 2008, the former CEO of Garuda Indonesia, Indra Setiawan, was sentenced to 12 months in jail for conspiring in the killing. The court had found the former Garuda chief guilty of abusing his authority to allow the Garuda pilot on board the flight to poison the activist.
That put a dent on the reputation of Garuda and impacted people's perception of the airline. Of course, you could argue that this was one incident, but I think it's one other bad thing that happened to the airline that made people think twice before booking it.
But this time, Garuda's new management had learned to deal with the PR crisis more effectively. It also focused on rehabilitating its image and, at the same time, getting the company's finances back on an even keel. By 2008, Garuda was finally turning in a profit.
We budgeted net profit of 580 billion for 2008, but we exceeded. I think we booked net profit of somewhere around 700 or 800 billion rupiah.
And that wasn't the only good news. In July 2009, the EU decided to lift the safety ban against Garuda and 3 other Indonesian airlines. And in the same month, Garuda's CEO, Emir Shahsatar, announced an aggressive 5-year expansion plan for the airline. It involved newer planes and an image overhaul, including a new logo and staff uniforms. Passengers like Robert Chow were impressed.
When they declare like, now we're going to buy a new fleet. We're going to scrap all these 737 Classic. For me, as an aviation lover, I really like it. I told myself, I make it. Why? I stayed together with Garuda. I'm become their loyal customer.
On 11th February 2011, the airline made its debut on the Indonesia Stock Exchange.
I think the privatization for Garuda in 2011 is a major milestone because for many decades it's a government operation. Finances were not really open to scrutiny. So it was a major endorsement for the company for the transformation plan that took it since the mid-2000s and so on, all the way to the lifting of the EU's ban. It really says a lot about the actions of the managers and every staff members there as well.
It was a brand new era for Garuda. In 2012, after decades of developing its brand at home, the household name attempted to spread its wings internationally. It did what many other airlines in the world were doing at that time: sponsor an English football club.
Sharing the same passion brings people around the world together as one family.
And it didn't take long for the awards to come rolling in. In 2014, Garuda was one of only 7 international airlines to be given a 5-star rating by Skytrax, an international body that ranks airline services.
The 5-star rating speaks volumes of what Garuda has accomplished because only fewer than, I believe, 10 airlines around the world were actually accorded this 5-star ratings.
Garuda is about the people. We have high spirit of togetherness, a high sense of belonging to the company and also to each other. It was the hard work of 6,000 people to turn around the business. Without the sweat and the hard work of those 6,000 people, then, you will not see what Garuda is today.
Captain Nababan was one of the 6,000, and on his 65th birthday, he went on his final flight. After decades of battling through Garuda's lows, he officially became the oldest pilot in all of Indonesia.
Saya menjadi orang yang pertama mencapai itu di Indonesia, jadi saya juga dicatat di Museum Rekor Indonesia sebagai orang yang pertama. Ketika saya join Garuda, saya punya perasaan senang. Ketika saya melakukan penerbangan terakhir, saya juga punya perasaan yang kurang lebih sama. Artinya, saya senang bahwa semuanya sudah bisa berjalan dengan baik dan ya bangga aja bahwa inilah kita pernah memulai, ya kita juga pernah harus mengakhiri.
For Captain Nababan, his Garuda journey has come full circle. He now teaches cadet pilots at the Garuda Training Center.
Yang saya harapkan dari mereka, karena mereka menjadi duta dari perusahaan, mereka harus tampil selalu prima dan profesional.
Today, Garuda is one of the world's most loved airlines, with the highest satisfaction rating among over 400 carriers around the world. It's been a long road from near bankruptcy. The days of bad meals and lousy customer service are finally behind them.
I'm happy to see, where Garuda is today. I believe that Garuda will continue to strive in Indonesia as well as regionally. I think where they are today versus where they were is a different ballgame. They now have stronger balance sheets, and the Indonesian market will continue to grow. and also the Asia Pacific market will continue to be a lucrative market for the airlines.
In keeping with the glossy image of their adverts, the experience for Garuda's loyal passengers was being similarly transformed.
Flying with Garuda is must for me. I always say to my children, be proud when people ask you, which airline are you coming from? Garuda, sir. This is national airline.
And this national airline is served by a team of employees who only wanted to do their best. From fighting against corruption to receiving late monthly salaries, Garuda staff battled through the turmoil.
Ya karena saya pengen Garuda jangan sampai jatuh, Garuda jangan sampai tenggelam, harus tetap ya semangat, harus membawa nama Garuda itu sampai orang mengetahui ini loh Garuda. Sekalipun ada masalah di dalam, tapi Garuda tetap berjalan, tetap terbang.
I would say why Garuda can get out of this bankruptcy is because the commitment of everybody in Garuda. Our philosophy in working, we say one team, one spirit, one goal. I'm here, but I cannot do it myself. And all of this, what's happening, is because of Garuda's employees. You know, if not, Garuda won't be here.
On behalf of Garuda Indonesia, the entire crew are very happy to welcome you on board. Thank you and we wish you a pleasant flight.